So today's video is about creating to please.
I can go a mile a minute, I told you to get out of my way.
Hey, what's up everybody? It's Matt Steinfeld, and today's video is about creating to please, specifically creating music in order to please other people. If you're like me, you're writing songs, you're composing music, you're messing around, and you're either your home or your studio, and you're making stuff, and you may have a very distinct sound or something that you're going for, or maybe you're just starting out and you don't really know, what you're doing yet or what you would like to do. Well, it comes down to when you make music and when you put melody and lyrics and music together, you have something that eventually you will share with other people. And some people will critique it very constructively. They will tell you what they think works, what doesn't, maybe even give you some pointers if they're an established musician or if they have experience. Maybe they point you in a direction that might help you. And then there's other people who are just strictly going to say, yeah, it's good, or no, it's terrible, or maybe just say something emotionally charged instead of something that's directly related to the content. Whatever it is, you're going to experience feedback from people. And depending on what kind of feedback you get, whether you get a bunch of negative comments or maybe people criticizing you personally, or whether you have people that just tell you that it's really, really good, and either way, whatever it is, how you respond, how I respond is incredibly important as songwriters, as musicians, as recording artists. So today I want to talk about creating to please, because this is going to be a pitfall for many of us who are going to consistently put out music. And I think the more music you put out, the more opportunities you have to get feedback, because you get more touching points or more moments where people are receiving music. Whereas if you just put maybe out a single, there's not much opportunity to kind of dive into what you've created. But I want to talk about two specific things, two specific people that are kind of independent of each other that I came across this past week that has affected my thinking on this idea of creating to please. The first is an episode in a documentary series called This Is Pop. It's on Netflix now. I highly recommend it. It's very, very interesting, especially if you grew up in the early 2000s, late 90s. It's very informative, and it might be even nostalgic for you. But T-Pain was on there, and he was talking about his experience using auto-tune and how this kind of became his hallmark sound in his vocal chain. And he was sharing that in the height of his fame and popularity, he was on a private jet, and an Usher, another R&B artist, recording artist, kind of sat down next to him and was like, hey, look, man, what you're doing is messing up music, pop music, for people who are natural singers, for people who have good voices and are consider themselves vocalists. You are ruining pop music. And what this did was, T-Pain says that for the next 4 years, he went into a series of depression, a time of emotional distress because of these statements. And it caused him to question how he made music, and it caused him to question his goal, his sound, and who he was as an artist, which is a very strong, impactful event in his life. Another artist that I heard recently was on a podcast that I listened to called I forgot the name of the podcast. It's a songwriting podcast by Joe Pug, and the guest was Chris Carrabba, who is basically the band Dashboard Confessional. Now, I'm not necessarily a big fan of Dashboard Confessional, or even of T-Pain for that matter. But what he said is that if you know anything about Dashboard Confessional, it was kind of coming out of the kind of coming out of punk music before emo, before the very emotive and music of the early 2000s that was related to kind of teen angst and disappointment and love, and they were, they were a big group. I remember them as a kid and or as a teenager. A lot of people in school were listening to them, and one of the things that I knew growing up was that Dashboard was kind of a meme before a meme. They were kind of the brunt of a joke of emo music, and how it was, cheesy teenage angsty punk, and it didn't have necessarily a good reputation in terms of its style. Now, one thing about this is that in the same way that T-Pain got this criticism from Usher, Chris Carrabba was saying that in general, he was aware of this pushback against this genre of music, and it caused him to question his identity as an artist, as a songwriter, as a musician. And there were times where he felt that in order for him to properly exist in the music industry, it was important that he began to pull back on these topics that initially got him popularity, such as speaking about his emotions and his pain and his relationships. That his lyrics, he said, became more vague and more protected, because whenever he put himself out there, people responded in a critical way. In a critical way, meaning that they were criticizing him, not in terms of being a critic. Now, what does this mean for you and I? Because, the chances are you and I aren't going to have fame like T-Pain or Chris Carrabba or Dashboard Confessional. These are people who made a very strong wave and have millions of fans to this day. But what does it mean at the small level for you and I to get critique, to get pushback, or to get feedback about our music? And it's really, really important. And I could just say, of course, this video is not here to say that it's okay to create to please people. It's just not. If you've watched any of my videos before, that's not where I'm coming from. That it's easy to say, okay, well, it's not good to pander to other people. For example, if you're interested in, say, a guy or a girl, you're interested in being in a relationship with them, and you go up to them and say, I'd really like to be in a relationship with you, but I'm really interested in understanding better what you want in someone. And that might come across as thoughtful. Then that person might say, well, why are you asking this? And then you respond, well, because I want to be who you want me to be, so you will like me. Now, if you heard someone say that, you would think that was kind of psychotic. That's weird, because usually when you're in a relationship, you're with someone, or they're with you because you like them for who they are, naturally. Whether they're funny, or whether they're attractive, or whether they like a certain sport or certain type of music or art, or they share the same interests, right? Someone who's pretending to be something that they're not, or someone that they're not, is a phony, is a hypocrite. I think the same thing is true with music. That if T-Pain all of a sudden started to change his auto-tune and make this music that was a far departure from the music that made him famous and what he personally enjoyed, right? He was making music that he liked, and that just happened to be famous. If he were to depart from that because of the critics, it would mean that A, he wasn't making the music that he actually wanted, but B, that he was focused more on the audience and the people who would receive him. Same thing is true with Chris Carrabba. If when he began to depart from what made him famous, when he was actually trying to please people or his critics that made fun of him, it actually just separated him from his audience who loved him for the music that he was making. You see, when we as independent artists are making music, it's really easy to hear people who are critical of us. And if you've ever shared music with your friends or your family, most of them don't see your potential. Most of them are going to see you for who they have known all their lives. And if you're just now writing music, they're going to probably think, well, that's not you. That's not this or that. I know you as maybe a student, or I know you as someone who works here, or someone that does this. So it's hard for people to associate what you're creating with you as a person for who they know. And so the people who create new sounds, the people who have made an impact on music, like these two artists, T-Pain and Chris Carrabba, they were highly critical or received high criticism. But now you look at auto-tune and it's everywhere. It's all over pop music. You look at emotive, angsty teen music and it's everywhere, right? People sing about their emotions and sing about their feelings all the time. Now, that's something that Chris Carrabba created, but he was kind of in the front edge of that in particular pop music, as well as T-Pain, but they were highly, highly criticized. And so there's this weird kind of tension between, yes, you want to please people, you want to please your audience, especially if you have fans, you want to give them music that they like. But also, if we focus on pleasing other people, we're always going to be guessing what we should do. And sometimes if you've ever been in a relationship or tried to please someone based on what you thought they wanted, it hardly ever works. It's like trying to shoot a moving target because people's emotions will fluctuate. If you had fans when you were, in your early 20s and your fans were teenagers, 20 years later, your fans are now, middle-aged people with young kids and they're buying houses and they're maybe getting long-term jobs, right? Maybe they're in a totally different place than they used to be. It's hard to guess. It's impossible to guess what people want. So this leaves us with an issue that when we are starting out or writing music, or maybe you've been writing music for a long time and you're not getting much traction or getting many listeners or getting much feedback, that just may be an issue with the music. But when it comes to feedback, when it comes to people providing their feedback about what we do, it's incredibly difficult to not take that personally and to think that, especially if it's negative, to think that we need to change some massive thing in order for us to be successful, especially if that causes us to depart from what we're doing and what we love, what we really do care about, the music that we really would like to make. Comparison is a deadly thing. But when it's not just us comparing ourselves to other artists and thinking that we need to be more like them, it's usually when the comparative issue usually comes up when people tell us things that go against what we're doing. And people, the market is the market, the market decides whether your music is good or not, unfortunately. And it's subjective because it may be great music, but people don't like it. Or it may be bad music and everybody loves it, right? From a technical standpoint, it's subjective. The market will tell you if the music is good or not, and maybe someone may or may not be ahead of their time, or maybe they're behind the times. It's hard to know. It's hard to discern whether someone that it's easy to say that the crowd determines the value of the music. It's subjective. The market will tell you whether it's good music or not. It's easy to take those types of statements and put that in the hands of one person and say, well, this one person that really likes me doesn't like my music. And so that means I must need to change or be different or switch up everything. This isn't just unique to young artists or people who are singer-songwriters who don't have much of a following. This is true for some of the biggest names in music. They feel that their time is up. They feel that they've lost connection or that they're slipping and they have to change things up and evolve. And sometimes that's really good, but sometimes it's brought on by insecurity. And that's a problem. That living one's life trying to please other people is a losing game because they're always going to be fickle. If you may please one person by changing, but you're going to turn off other people by changing. What I really would like to see in my own life is that I stick to what I believe and what type of music I like to make. And the more music I make, the more I realize and have a nearer vision of what that is. It's so difficult for me. And I'm speaking personally now. Of course, I'm not T-Pain. I'm not Dashboard Confessional. I'm not famous. Far from it. I have very few listeners, and I feel like I'm just getting started. But if I focus on that, and I start to compare myself to other people, and I start to take on criticism from people who may not have the best interest, my best interest when they say what they say, it's really easy to feel pressure to switch up or to give up or to take a hard left turn and try to be more popish or try to be more this or that or trendy. When in reality, some of the most successful people all received this type of criticism, and the people just weren't ready for it. It may have been true at the time that it wasn't good, that people didn't like it, that it was weird or whatnot. And usually the first pioneer, the first person over the hill it doesn't make it. They're unheard of. But think about how much the people that you love and the artists that changed different styles of music, or at least made it popular, like an Elvis, all right? He didn't create rock and roll and blues and gospel songs, right? He made it. He didn't invent rock and roll. He simply was the person who most benefited from it at the time. There's probably a lot of criticism against other rock and rollers or people who were making that type of music in the South and the blues and rhythm and blues time periods and jazz and all the influences that came into that one particular moment that made it popular. It's so easy for us and for me to want to switch things up or look for ways to avoid the hard work of being consistent and making what I personally want to make. That's the most important thing as an artist. It's not trying to please other people. It's pleasing yourself, and then those people who see it authentically presented from you as being you and unique from you, that's when fans start to come. Fans can smell when things are inauthentic. I know I can. There's some people, I hear their music or I see their music videos or see their artwork, and you can just tell that it's a projection of what they want people to see them as. But if really you're an authentic artist, people know that. And they may not like it, but at least you'll be authentic. There's surely someone out in the world that's interested in what anyone is doing. Our hardest thing is just to find those people, which is a whole nother topic called marketing, which we don't have time for today to get into. I'm interested in what you think about this, about pleasing other people, creating other things, creating things to please. Does this affect you? Does this affect how you think? Maybe it's not something you've thought about before, or maybe it's something you think about all the time. Let me know in the comments about how you've dealt with that, about what your perspective is on this topic and how we as songwriters and recording artists can address this moving forward. Maybe some other examples of artists other than people like T-Pain or Dashboard Confessional. Maybe you've heard some other fun stories of people who've experienced that kind of resistance or pushback early on. Thank you for watching. I'm honored that anybody watches it. If this was helpful for you, please share it with a friend. That would mean a lot to me. That would help my channel. And as always, I'm grateful that you watch, and we will see you again next time.
All the way up